lot of people grow up saying like, oh, I want to change the world. I want to make things better in the community. And the only way to do that is to take on as much responsibility as you can bear. And you really only know how much responsibility that you can bear by failing. And people are so afraid of failure. And I think that they sell themselves short and don't take on as much responsibility as they can because they're so worried about reaching that failure point. And that is where growth, like that is the cutting edge of growth, right?
Welcome to After Peter Pan, the podcast all about growing up and finding more purpose. I'm your host, Pat Tenneriello, and I'm very excited to sit down with Matt Luloff in this episode. Matt is an Ottawa City councillor, Afghan war veteran, musician, husband, and father. We dive into how Matt built a deeper sense of purpose through a life dedicated to service and responsibility, first to his country in the armed forces, and now to his community in public office. He shares what the military taught him about failure and resilience, and his journey with mental health, working through exposure therapy for PTSD, and how those lessons now shape his leadership, family life, and approach to serving others. I hope you enjoy this episode. How long have you been married now?
This year we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, and
Congratulations.
we've been together. Thanks, man. We've been together for 16 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah,
Okay.
16 years and 10 years married and 6 years with kids. And yeah, it's the best, man. Like family's the best. You know, you start to feel it when you stop prioritizing family. That's for sure. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but like that's gotta be number one always, you know?
Yeah, maybe that's a good question is how has becoming a husband and a father sort of helped you on your personal growth journey and helped you in life?
I think that really the most important thing about starting your own family is it provides you with an opportunity to do things the way that you wish that they had been done maybe when you were growing up, you know. Don't get me wrong, like everybody, great deal of respect to your parents, and you know, there's not I'm sure that everybody as a parent wishes that they could do things a little bit differently, but it kind of gives you a bit of a clean slate. And at the same time, it provides you with an opportunity for the highest level of responsibility possible. And that's been sort of a theme in my life, is like take on as much responsibility as you can. And when you tie your life to someone, and sometimes it takes a couple of years being married to figure this out, but when you tie your life to someone, you're no longer like a single entity anymore. You're no longer just yourself. You are accountable for pretty much every decision that you make to somebody else. And that realization that, you know, whether you make a choice in your career or you make, you know, a mistake or something that affects other people. And so I think that being in starting my own family and becoming a dad really sort of drives home the responsibility that you need to take on to ensure that not only you're being a good partner to somebody, but also that you're demonstrating the skills that you want your children to either take on themselves or to seek out in a partner as well, right? You are the first, so as a man anyway, you're the first example that you provide your children as to like what a grown-up male, how a grown-up male acts and how a grown-up male conducts their life. And that is a huge responsibility. And I think that fundamentally, and although it may take some time, fundamentally changes the way that you both look at the world, look at yourself, carry yourself, and interact with others.
Oh, great answer. I completely agree with you. And the theme of responsibility is really kind of the crux of why I wanted to talk to you, Matt, because you've taken on a tremendous amount of responsibility in your life in terms of the roles that you've taken on. So we talked husband and father, but also in the community, you've taken on a lot of responsibility in the military. You talked about accountability in your answer. You know, you're not just representing yourself, you're accountable for a lot more than that when you're a member of the military. When you're an elected politician, you're representing the community, and your actions have a big impact. And so I'm really glad you brought up early this theme of responsibility, because I really want to get into that with you. I think today in discourse in the media, what we hear, we don't hear so much that message of responsibility. What I typically hear, and I want your take on that. This is this idea of privilege. Some people are born with a certain amount of privilege. Some people have less, and so it's about trying to rejig and trying to make sure everyone's treated equally. And maybe that's a good thing, and maybe that's a conversation that we need to have as a society. But I think that what we may have lost is this sense of responsibility. A society, a community works when people take on a burden of responsibility, as much responsibility as they can handle. You've taken on your fair share. What do you make of that? This idea of privilege versus responsibility in the discourse that we have today?
Yeah, this is something that I've spoken to some students at Carleton University about. I mean, I did a Bachelor of Public Affairs and Policy Management at Carleton, and oftentimes the faculty asked me to come back and do like panel discussions with them. And I had somebody raise their hand once and say, like, listen, you talk a lot about responsibility, but what about our rights? Like, don't you think that it's important that our rights are respected? And to me, like, there are some inalienable rights, without question. I mean, and they're outlined in our founding document. But I'm a big believer that every single right or privilege that we have comes with an either equally or more important responsibility. So, for example, we have the right to free speech. I'm a huge believer in the right to free speech. I'm a huge believer in intellectual freedom. The ability to do your own reading, and I'm not talking about doing your own research, but doing your own reading, developing sort of your own worldview, how you look at the world, how you want to interact with the world. Perhaps that comes in the form of a personal ideology or whatever, and you have the right to speak your mind, and you should. But we also have a responsibility for what we say and how we interact. These responsibilities are just as important as the rights that we have. And so the interaction between the two, I think they're symbiotic. I think that it's important that we recognize this deep relationship between our privileges, our rights, and our responsibilities. And you're totally right to point out that, I believe that the meaning of it all is to take on as much responsibility as you can. And I mean, a lot of people grow up saying like, oh, I want to change the world. I want to make things better in the community. And the only way to do that is to take on as much responsibility as you can bear. And you really only know how much responsibility that you can bear by failing. That is the only way to know. And people are so afraid of failure. And I think that they sell themselves short and don't take on as much responsibility as they can because they're so worried about reaching that failure point. And that is where growth, like that is the cutting edge of growth, right? We don't learn from our successes. I don't believe that. And I think there's hundreds of people that have said this. I don't think I've learned from one success that I've had. What I learned from is failure. And that is so important. And I think that what's missed in this discussion too is, so you take on as much responsibility as you can bear, and then you fail, and you learn your weaknesses, and you learn from that, and then you grow from that. And then you can take on even more responsibility afterwards. I think a lot of people just give up. They fail and they go, oh, that wasn't for me. And it's like, no, you've geared your whole life, your whole existence to getting to a point. And once you get there, you're like, okay, well, that's good. I'm good. Or you fail in that and you go, well, I was wrong the whole time. No, you weren't. It's about how you handle that failure, how you use it as a moment for introspection, and how you better yourself so that you can take on more responsibility afterwards. I think that's really the trick.
Yeah, well said. Why do you think people are so afraid of failure, and what can they do to build resiliency to be able to deal with it when it does come, when it does happen?
Failure sucks. Like failure, it sucks. Like it doesn't feel good, especially if you fail catastrophically, or people, or publicly. You really feel like you've let people down and let yourself down when you fail. And that is not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling, but it's an important thing to feel. It's an important part of building greater successes. I'm somebody, and I joke about this with my friends and my wife sometimes, where it's like, I need to learn hard lessons. I don't know what it is about my personality, but like, I need the hard lesson. I need to learn it the hard way. And sometimes that's really difficult. Sometimes that is so, it's frustrating and challenging. But I find that, if somebody goes through a catastrophic failure, and yeah, sure, like spend your day, or your 2 days, or your week, or whatever it is, like, it's consummate with the size of the failure, and lick your wounds, and and wallow a little bit. That's fine. But you have to get to a point where it's like, okay, why did this happen? What can I do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? What lessons about myself have I learned? Are there parts of my personality that led to this? How can I take that maybe weaker part of who I am and grow? Are there changes that I have to make? It's an opportunity to kind of recalibrate and move forward. I think that by what you're doing, and I'm sure you've talked about success and failure 100 times with the great guests that you pick. I think it's if people hear that more and more often, and they see that, and they see people fail and then dust themselves off and get back up again, and go again, and then fail again, and then keep trying and keep trying. That persistence and that grit is what drives a society forward. If we have more and more people taking on as much responsibility as they can, failing, learning from it, growing, and becoming stronger, and then keeping going. It's like bodybuilders, except you're doing this with your life, or you're doing this with your mind. You don't get bigger unless you tear your muscles, and that hurts, and it's painful, and you have to, you spend a couple of days sore, but eventually, that muscle builds up, and you become stronger, and you can take on more. It's the same thing with your mind, and it's the same thing with growing as a person.
So some people listening who kind of know your story might say, well, it's great to hear him say it. I haven't seen much failure. Like, when people dig into your story, you've done some tremendous things. And what we read online and what we know about you, it's like, well, this guy hasn't failed, right? You know what I mean? Like, you were involved with Parliament Hill. You worked for a number of prominent politicians. You were in the military. You were deployed to Afghanistan. You were elected on your first try. You were successful in music with your band, and so someone might at first glance say, well, this guy's got nothing but success. It's easy for him to say, deal with failure. I'm assuming, the answer, if I was in your shoes, would be something like, it's kind of like an iceberg, right? You just see the top, and all the stuff under the water. That's the failure. But I'd be curious to know how you would react, or maybe you could share some examples of failure and how you dusted yourself off and got back up.
Sure. I mean, I've failed more times than I've been successful, without question. Without question, and for example, so I joined the Canadian Armed Forces as a reservist. I spent 4 years as a reservist, and then I felt a calling to serve in the regular force. And so I joined the regular force, and every course that you do in the military teaches you to fail. Like, there are tests, inspections, nobody passes an inspection ever, because it's there to teach you that you can always do better, that good enough isn't good enough, that you need to be conscientious about everything all the time, and not just yourself, but ensuring that the other people around you don't fail. That is like one of the biggest, most basic lessons that you learn in the Canadian Forces, is that there's no one individual winner. If the guy beside you failed, well, the whole team failed. The whole team. So, loads of examples in my training of coming up short. Oh man, I was I got to do my reconnaissance training. We call it recce in Canada, or recon in the States, or whatever. I was a no hook private, so I had no rank. I just finished all of my training. When I joined the Reg Force, I basically started all over again. They let me keep a couple of the basic courses, but I had to redo my basic infantry qualification over again. A course that I had done, 3 years prior. I had to do it over again. And once I got to the battalion, basically there was an opportunity to go on this reconnaissance course. And like typically you wait until you've been in for 2, 3, 4 years before you take this course. But they canvassed everyone, and they picked, I think, 5 of us or whatever. And they said, "Are any of you interested in taking this course?" And it is grueling, like absolutely grueling. Like we're talking, very, very little sleep, very little food. Depending on where you take it, like we did ours on Vancouver Island in the middle of winter. So it was cold, it was wet, it was awful. And you have to basically, navigate for days. And, you get attacked along the way, and you have to, accurately relay information back to the battle group about the, enemy forces that you find and whatnot. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of memory work as well. And, I can remember like being thrown in the back of a truck at like 3:30 in the morning with 2 Ziploc bags, one with a red glow stick in it and one with a green glow stick in it, with like 10 items in each bag. And then being like, remember this. And so you're like, everybody has to share. Everybody needs to, look at it and figure out what's in this bag and what's in this bag. And then we like went and we ran through the mountains for like 3.5 hours, and we get back and we run right past the base, and then we pick up telephone poles, and then you got to run with the telephone poles on one shoulder and over your head and on the other shoulder. And by that time you've forgotten about everything that's happened at 4:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning. And you get back and they go, "Okay, great. Like good session. Okay. What was in the green bag and what was in the red bag?" And you're like, "Oh man." So like they teach you how to retain information, despite the fact that you've just put your body through so much. And I'm sure that there were guys that were running, and going like, okay, in the red bag, there was a compass, there was a pencil, there was a map, the whole time. But like you so easily get distracted by, the physical exertion and the pain that you feel that you forget about it. So I did all this like very hard work to get to a point. And then when I get back to the battalion, they dismiss the commander of reconnaissance platoon to go off and do something else. And they bring in somebody brand new who I'd never met before. And, this is before I reconnected, with my faith. On my dog tag, it said NRE, no religion expressed. And this new commander was super Christian. And so he asked me about it, and I told him what it meant. And, he made a comment like, "I don't know if I could trust an atheist with me on this." And I was like, "I don't think that's very appropriate, to be quite honest with you, sir. Like, I worked really hard to get here, and we're gonna do this." And they found every opportunity to like write me up, to say that my like level of physical fitness wasn't there, that I was not a good troop, and like as much as they could try to either get me to quit or to leave the platoon. Well, I kept persevering, and I went overseas with them. And then there was, I guess they continued to try and get me to quit. And so we were meant to go out on a patrol one night, and these vehicles have very thick bulletproof glass. The ones that we were driving in, they were called the Nyala. It's a 4 wheels. It's supposed to be bomb resistant. The bottom of it's shaped like a boat. Anyway. And they said, "Okay, we're going to go out on this patrol." I was driving, and we want you to use your night vision glasses only. And we're going to go, every second car is going to have their blackout lights on, which is like basically like your fog lights, but even thinner and smaller. And I was like, listen, like, I'm not going to be able to see. Like, I'm not going to be able to drive this vehicle safely with other people in it with a night vision, with a single monocular night vision goggle, not two, just one. So you've lost all your depth perception, which is difficult to do to begin with. And I'm looking through bulletproof glass. I'm not going to be able to see. This is going to be a failure. We're going to have to either turn our lights on or figure out another way to do this, or hook up some equipment whereby I can be looking at a monitor while I'm driving, like something. And they said, no, you're going to do it. And they ordered me to do it. And I couldn't see, man. Like, I'm driving and I can't see. Like, there was nothing I could do about it. And I, on the way between the gates or whatever, I ditched the vehicle. We didn't flip or anything. Like, I ended up hung up on the Hesco bash and, hung up on the wall basically. But I was like, look, listen, I told you guys, I was honest with you that I knew that this was not going to work out. Cause like basically I didn't have my lights on. The guy behind me had his lights on, so he could probably see a little better than me, but I wasn't allowed to have my lights on. And the guy in front of me had his lights on, but they're not helping me. I can't see anything,
Jeez.
So, we go back to the base, and, they write me up for it. And then one morning I wake up after going to bed early and everybody's gone. And I put on my stuff and I go down to the lines, and everybody's getting ready to go out on a mission. And I'm the only one that wasn't made aware of it. They were ordered not to wake me up, to leave him. We're not taking him. And they dismissed me from reconnaissance platoon. They kicked me out of the platoon, and they sent me to company stores where basically I was like a gopher. I got coffee for the warrant and did laundry. It was really, really humiliating, like publicly humiliating. And so I had these great skills. I knew that I was a good soldier, but I didn't have the confidence of the guy leading my platoon. And here's an example of just picking yourself up. I had 2 weeks in that role. I'm overseas. I'm in Afghanistan, but I'm staying in Kandahar airfield. It's so embarrassing. I felt so embarrassed. And one night I went to they had like a library that was like a sea container. So you could go in there, it was air conditioned, whatever, and you could take a book out or whatever. And they also had musical instruments. And this is something that I carried with me afterwards. We have musical instruments at the Ottawa Public Library now. So I went in there and I took a guitar out, and I was just kind of jamming and sitting on a bench and writing some lyrics. I started writing some of the songs that would eventually end up on the first record that I recorded with the band that I formed when I came back. And this guy comes up to me and he sits down beside me. He's like, you mind if I play with you? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not very good, but I'll play with you. And he went and got his guitar and he sat down and we're chatting. And he's like, you're Matt Luloff, right? And I was like, yeah, who are you? And he's like, it doesn't really matter. He's like, how'd you like to go back out there? You're a recce guy, right? And I was like, I used to be a recce guy. He's like, don't ever say that. He's like, I'm not in recce platoon, but I'm a recce guy. We got this platoon where the officer isn't that great at navigation, and we know that reconnaissance trained guys are really good at navigation. And if there's an opportunity, we'd really like to send you back out there to be in this platoon. And I was like, yeah, that'd be incredible. And he was like, all right. So we played for a bit, and really nice guy. Anyway, the next day he came to see me, and he was a master warrant officer. He was the quartermaster stores instructor, so the second highest ranking non-commissioned member of our battle group. Had no idea.
Wow.
No idea what I was chatting with him. I didn't call him sir. I didn't know. Anyway, they sent me out a couple of days later. A gentleman by the name of Terry Street died, unfortunately, in an IED incident. And they flew me out to 5 Platoon, where I met up with a bunch of people that I'd never met before, except for maybe one or two. I was given a fire team partner that I'd never trained with. And I had the best goddamn tour I ever could have thought of. I got to plan the routes for our patrols. I got to go on pretty much every single foot patrol that we did. We got into a lot of fights. I got the experience of an infantry soldier that I wanted. And I lived out in a combat outpost for 6 months with these guys, and created some of the strongest friendships of my life. And if you had told me that the day that I got fired, basically, that I was going to have the best tour that I ever could have imagined, I wouldn't have believed you. You know, sometimes when we fail, there's another opportunity around the corner. And you can never forget that. I was humiliated, Pat, like humiliated. And that's just like that's just one example, like, of times where I've been absolutely, utterly humiliated. You know, after working really hard during the 2015 election, you know, I couldn't get hired. The Minister of Veterans Affairs, who had been appointed, his team didn't want me because I was too close to the files. And I was like, I've worked my whole post-military career up to, you know, working for veterans and working in Veterans Affairs, and they wouldn't even hire me. Awful. I was on unemployment for the first time in my life, applying for unemployment, like going back to Veterans Affairs saying, I don't have a job anymore. You were right. You know, university wouldn't get me a job, you know. But, you know, Andy Leslie hired me to work in the whip's office, which put me in front of the Minister of National Defense. The Minister of National Defense heard my voice when I was barking at people, telling them to go in and vote. And he was like, hey, you're that guy that I worked with during the election. You're bright. Like, why don't you come and work on my team? And then I worked for him for 3 years, doing some really great work. And so you just never know what's around the corner. In the moment of, you know, abject failure and feeling like, you know, you're done. There's something there. There's something that you can either learn or grow from, or there's another opportunity just waiting in the wings for you. And I think that just having that faith that, nope, this is where I'm supposed to be. There's a lesson for me here, you know, and, you know, having a little bit of humility about what you've just been through, and deciding that this is something I'm going to learn from, is one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned. That, and what other people think about you is none of your business. So why would you think about it anyway?
Thank you for that, Matt. I want to pick up on one thing you said. You said in the military, your tag said NRE. That was before your faith. So I'm assuming there's been a change in your life in that regard, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm like, you know, a zealot or whatever, but I mean, I grew up as a Catholic, and I went to Catholic school, and I was an altar boy as well. And I felt really connected to my faith. And then during my time in the, you know, leading up to and in the military, I kind of lost that a bit, and a lot. I lost it a lot. And I don't know. I guess it's always kind of sat in the back of my mind that I should, you know, reconnect with my faith. And so yeah, it's something that I think about. It's something that I think about a lot more now. A few weeks ago, I went and visited the church that I used to go to, and spoke with the priest, and you know, asked to do confession, and did confession, and sort of starting to get myself right with my church and with my beliefs. And this is just the beginning of the second round of the journey for me, but I certainly do have a hell of a lot more faith than I ever have.
That's great. It sounds to me like the military really played a big role in your life and taught you a lot of important lessons, and instilled resiliency through failures, and potentially, sounds like, built up confidence as well. One thing you've been open about is your PTSD diagnosis. How did you come to understand and address it? And I'm assuming its roots came from your deployment in Afghanistan, but I would love to hear more about that, because on the podcast, we cover mental health and wellness often.
Yeah. So I returned from Afghanistan near the end of 2008, and man, I just did not feel the same. And I'd started to feel it in the middle of the tour, but you kind of shove it down, and just to kind of get through it. But just a deep sense of loss and pain and frustration and anger, and recurring thoughts of, some of what I did and some of what I saw and contributed to, and, you know, friends that had been hurt and friends that had passed away, and just very intrusive and very difficult memories, just begging to be dealt with and begging to be understood, which is, you know, that's obviously in retrospect, but I went and saw a mental health professional in the military after Christmas that year, because I just needed to blow off some steam, and I was like, you know, it was a really intense, I'll just get over it. But in January of 2009, I was diagnosed like with PTSD. And at that time, like, the military was not as good to people suffering with mental health. It was basically a death sentence for your career. And my contract was coming up. Your initial contract, i.e. initial engagement, is 3 or 5 years, depending on what trade you're in. For infantry, it's 3 years. And so I was offered my second contract, and a lot of people trying to convince me to resign. And I was like, no, like, I'm not going to resign if I'm diagnosed with PTSD. I'm gonna get out and go do something else, because obviously my career is going to stall, and there's a lot of stigma around mental health issues, and I didn't want to be a pariah. You know, I think that that's largely changed now. I think that there's been a lot of work on that, and there are ways to ostensibly cure your PTSD. It can, you can treat it, and it's not a life sentence, PTSD, at all. But I didn't understand that at the time. So I get out of the military in 2009, and I'm just having a real rough time, and I'm blowing off steam, and I'm like self-medicating to, you know, feel some serotonin, some dopamine, because like you're miserable, like you're absolutely miserable. It's not, obviously not the right approach, but I had a really good case manager with VAC that stayed on top of me and made sure that I was going to my appointments. And I had a good psychologist. He was a wonderful man. But he wouldn't push me. I don't think he didn't push me very hard. You know, we developed skills for coping. You know, he talked a little bit about exposure therapy, but it was more about the symptoms and not about the actual cause. So it's like, you have trouble in crowds. Well, you should go out and stand on Rideau Street during rush hour and just get used to it, you know, and put yourself through that. And so he was really good at treating my symptoms. So I got to a point where I was like functioning, and I was really driven by the loss of human potential of my friends that died. And I felt like, and this is not fair, but I felt like I was responsible as somebody who survived to like, to achieve on that lost potential. There's like way too much to put on one human. But I mean, mental health issues can really screw with your head. And so I was utterly driven, and, you know, did well in school, and, stayed up late and got great grades. And, you know, Veterans Affairs said, listen, at that time anyway, they were like, we're not going to pay for a university. You know, you have to prove that you're going to get a job at the end of it. University doesn't get you a job. And they would only pay for 2 years of school. And so, like, you know, I started volunteering on Parliament Hill at that time, while I was also, you know, working in the evenings, and, you know, to prove to Veterans Affairs that I could get a job afterwards in politics. And I got hired in my third year, and was actually working for a member of Parliament in my third year while I was going to school part-time. I was working for the member of Parliament to prove to Veterans Affairs that I would have a job at the end of it. And, you know, went through all that, all through that time. I'm also playing music, and we, you know, came in second place in that Live 885 Big Money Shot, and won, you know, 45 grand, and went and recorded a record with a couple of well-known, in the industry anyway, Canadian producers, and did some touring or whatever. And, you know, basically I was working myself so hard that I wouldn't think about my mental health. It is so unhealthy. And what I really need to do is stop and just deal with the core issue, instead of figuring out all the hacks and all the workarounds to deal with my different anxieties and whatever. Because it catches up to you, man. Like I liken I was chatting with somebody about this the other day. I like it. PTSD is like, your mom makes you a sandwich when you're in high school that you don't really like. Instead of, dealing with it or eating it or throwing it in the garbage or giving it to somebody else, you stick it in the back of your locker. Well, it doesn't go anywhere if you don't deal with it. It just rots. And eventually, like, your clothes start to stink and your bag starts to stink and your books start to stink. And if you let it go long enough, the lockers beside you start to stink. And so it starts to affect other people. That's, to me, what PTSD is like. If you let it rot, if you let that rot, it's going to start to affect everything. And it might take some time, but it will get there. You might be able to convince yourself, I'm doing great. I'm fine. But at the same time, you're self-medicating. You're, not sleeping well enough. You're not getting the exercise that you need. You're just, going 120 kilometers an hour and enough to distract yourself from what you're feeling and what's really going on. And, that comes crashing down, and it did for me too. And my psychologist had retired. And so I got referred to a new lady, and I sat down with her, and she's really wonderful. And she was like, do you believe that you can cure your PTSD? And I said, no, I don't. She said, okay, well, let me carry that banner of hope for you until I can hand it off to you. And I was like, okay. And I did this thing called exposure therapy. And exposure therapy is essentially reliving the experience that, caused your PTSD over and over and over again in as much reality in a controlled setting as possible. Because what PTSD really is unprocessed emotion and unprocessed events in your life. And because you haven't taken the time to unpack it and understand it. And so it just gets worse and worse and worse because and it'll keep coming back until you process it. And so what you have to do is you basically have to relive those events every day until your units of distress, till you don't relive it, right? Till you're not reliving it, till it's a story of something that happened to you. And I can remember, man, like, what does that look like in practice? Chatting with your therapist, having her, him, or yourself write out all of the details, minute details, sand in your mouth, smells, colors, how you feel, your reaction, your breathing, sweat, all of the five senses as immersive as possible in the greatest amount of detail. And then reading it or listening to yourself saying it over and over and over again for an hour every day. I think she told me I could take weekends off if I wanted to, but I didn't. I just wanted to deal with it. And then tracking your subjective units of distress. So on a scale of like 0 to 10, like how much distress do you feel when you're reading it? I remember after the first week, Pat, like I called her and I was like, listen, Celine, like I'm a 10 every day. And she's like, it's going to get better. I promise you. And I was like, I don't believe you. And she's like, I promise you it'll get better. Talk to you next week. And so I went through it again for another 7 days, and I called her and I said, okay, like this is really hard. And she's like, well, are you as bad as it was last week? And I was like, no, it's not as bad as it was last week, but it's awful. And she's like, okay, talk to you next week. And gradually over the course of about 45 days, I got to a point where I was sitting at like a 1 one day, a 3, a 1. And then now the incidents that I went through and the things that I did and saw and whatever, I can openly talk to with people, and you don't get that physical reaction anymore. Like I don't feel, like I'm still there, right? And so the most important thing that you can do if you're somebody suffering with PTSD or suffering with a mental health injury or with poor mental health, and this is so easy to say and so hard to do. I get it. It's hard. But there's nothing in this life that is important and worth it that isn't hard. Nothing. Is being married hard? Yes. Is having kids hard? Yes. Is failing over and over and over again hard? Yes. But like that is what you need to do. And so what you need to do is deal with it and deal with it properly with a professional. Peer support, That's nice. It's nice to know that there are other people going through what you're going through. It's not going to save you. Riding a horse, yeah, that's nice to create that connection with an animal and you feel good and what it's not going to cure it. It's not going to end it. Getting a service dog, that's lovely. They can help you deal with your symptoms. That's like taking a paracetamol or taking a Tylenol when you have a headache. You know, if you have an aneurysm and you have a headache and you take a Tylenol, you may be not feeling it, but you're still having the bad effects on your body, obviously, right? It's like a Band-Aid for a heart attack, you know, like, you know, yeah. It's you're going to deal with the symptoms, but it's not going to cure you. So you gotta dig in and you gotta deal with it.
Your experience with your mental health professional, although mine wasn't focused on PTSD the way yours was, my childhood trauma, I can draw a lot of parallels. And one thing that I noticed is the trauma got me through the door. But once I was through the door, I realized the trauma's, you know, one thing that I need to work through. But then I realized that there were all these other things. And so it's like the work. And so I was, in a way, I came to a place where I could think about my trauma and not have that gut reaction occur like you shared, which was great. And then also realize I had all these other things to work on. But I also got to a point where I was, in a way, grateful for the trauma in the sense that it got me through the door to do the hard work. To your point about anything worth doing is going to be difficult. It's the things that are most difficult that you're going to get the greatest sense of purpose and meaning and joy, in the sense of not fleeting happiness, but profound joy. It will be hard, to your point. So I think I completely agree with you. And was your experience kind of like that, where your PTSD was the Trojan horse that got you through the door? Or would you say that it was really the work that was done was centered around that and that was okay?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first person that I went to go see, I was lying to, you know. I basically said, "Oh, I'm not ready to talk about that," and maybe I was ready, but no, you know, I don't think that there's one specific incident that we can discuss. You know, basically, I lived in a pressure cooker for 8 months, and I was very vague, and so all I was looking for were like the coping mechanisms, and so like, yeah, I mean, I got in the door with my first therapist, and what a lovely human being, really wanted to help me, but I wouldn't. Like, he had the tools on the table, but I wouldn't pick them up.
Okay.
You know, so I got like what I needed to skate by, which is like it's not going to help. When I got in the door with Celine, when I went in with Celine, like, she was singularly focused on getting me through this and getting me to the other side. She's like, you have a lot of potential. Everybody that I talk to here, you know, every human being has a lot of potential. And this is a barrier to you achieving that potential. And so let's peel that onion. Let's get right in there. Let's dig it out, because it's going to ruin your life if you don't. And you're right. Like, I've become very close with her, as many people do. And I feel comfortable if other things come up, or if I have other issues that I'm worried about or whatever, mental health wise, that I can go and see her. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, if I'm having trouble in other areas or whatever, this becomes somebody that you trust, right? Yeah, they've helped you with the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. And so now, like, kind of everything else, like, you use them as a sounding board, and you can kind of work through those things. I think that's a really important part of developing a decent relationship with a mental health professional.
And how did you go from we really dug into your military, we dug into the mental health, the PTSD, and I would love to transition to the getting elected and becoming a city councillor. Like, so did you do that work in mental health, and then that was kind of the foundation that gave you the confidence to say, hey, I think I can do this? What brought you forward to deciding you wanted to run for city councillor?
I think after spending 3 years working in a minister's office, I started to get really disillusioned with what I was seeing. You know, I saw promises that had been made in 2015, things that I'd worked towards, kind of get watered down, and I wasn't seeing the sort of progress on things that I wanted to see. Sure, there's some big wins. Things are better than they were, but it wasn't to the extent that I was looking for. And look, like I'm not going to be a partisan hack and name names and be specific or whatever. But I was feeling personally disillusioned by what I was seeing, and so like I couldn't contribute to that anymore. And yeah, I was going through. I had done the exposure therapy while I was in that role, and I was feeling more on solid ground. And I was ready to take on. I felt I was ready to take on more responsibility. And I got a telephone call from a friend that was running for city council and said, "Hey, listen, there's an announcement that the member of council from Orleans is not running. You should really consider doing it." And I was like, "Well, I've spent the last almost decade in federal politics. What do I know about city politics?" And he's like, "Well, you'll learn it fast, and and believe you me, like you deal with it every single day. You just don't think about it." And I was like, okay. And so I started doing some research, started reading some things, and I was like, yeah, no, I love Orleans. Like I love it. Some people want to run away as fast as they can. Other people come back and raise their families here. I've got, more pals that I've reconnected with in the last 10 years that are raising their families here than I can shake a stick at, And
I'm working on my wife slowly. I'm chiseling away. I'm not there yet. She got introduced to Orleans in the thick of COVID of March of 2020 is when we arrived. It was a dead of winter still. And it was dead. And so that was her first impression of Orleans, and it's stuck with her. So every time we go and visit my dad, go for walks, I try working on her because I would love to raise our kids in Orleans, but we're not there yet.
Take her to the bog. Take her on the Bill Holland Trail down at Petrie Island. Go, if you can convince her to stay for a part of a winter, go sledding at the Apollo Crater at Greens Creek. Like there's so many wholesome, wonderful things to do in this community. And a small anecdote, like after a consultation that I did out in Navan on the water, it was a water rate review, super, super dry. I guess that's a bad pun because it was the water rate review. A member of the mayor's staff was like, "Hey, can we, like, I didn't eat dinner. Can we go for a burger or whatever?" So I took him to a Corner Bar and Grill, which has two great burgers. I mean, sort of Bite Burger House and a bunch of others around here, but that was the first one that I thought of. I think it was a Monday night, so it was the only, kind of gourmet burger place open. And we went there. He's like, what the difference is between Orleans and Canada and Stittsville is like places like this, like real community places, not big box sort of like, it's not Moxie's and,
right,
Shoeless Joe's, which we do have up on Innis, but that's intermingled with like local, like truly local businesses, truly local restaurants. And he's like, that really does make Orleans quite special. And I was like, well, I'll tell you, there's a heck of a lot more that makes Orleans really special, but that is definitely one thing that I'm passionate about. So, I was like, what can I do? I see infrastructure starting to kind of go, what am I going to run on? And so I decided to run on building community. So getting more people together. This is pre-pandemic, obviously. Service groups dwindling, community associations starting to fall apart. And I was like, how can I foster like a discussion? Like, so building community, building up our economy, driving down St. Joseph a few years ago. And even now to a certain extent, you're kind of like, well, it's tired and we want to have more jobs in Orleans. We want people to live, work and play in the community. And for me, something that's always been really a big passion of mine, building support for those who serve. And so I started the Ottawa Veterans Task Force. Ottawa has home to more veterans than any other city in Canada. And I think that it's incumbent on all levels of government to be there and to support those who serve, whether they're, nurses, ex-nurses, doctors, police officers, anybody who puts themselves out there in service of the community, deserve our respect and our gratefulness, our thanks. And so these are three things that I ran on, and I talked to my wife about it, and I was like, listen, I think I'm going to run for office. And she was like, good, finally, like do it, go. And I ran against 17 people. There's 17 names on the ballot. And just worked my butt off, man. I knocked on every single door that I could. I knocked on doors 7 days a week, just absolute monster discipline. 7 days a week for 12 hours a day, every single day, out there, knocking on doors, talking to people, hearing from them, hearing their feedback, sometimes getting yelled at, sometimes people being really kind and sweet, but just really, if it's pouring, I'm out there. If it's hot, I have 3 shirts in the car. I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to work my butt off. And then I won with, I think, 23% of the vote, split 17 ways. You can get a plurality under 30%, and I won with 23% of the vote. I won by 240 or 280 votes or something like that against the next person. And I kept in touch with most, if not all, of the people that ran against me. And I've got some pretty great friendships out of them. And in fact, the person that came in second place to me is now sitting on city council in Orleans, South Dammit.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. Wonderful person to work with, wonderful partner. We had very similar visions when we were running against each other in 2018. I was part of the group of people that pushed her to run, in I think it was 2020 or 2021. Said, you got to do this. It'd be great to have you on council. And I've got a great friend and ally now. And, for me, it's always been about finding another way to serve. I felt like I had the rug pulled out from underneath me with that PTSD diagnosis. And I was like, what can I do? It's what I've always been passionate about. And so getting into politics, government, serving on Parliament Hill, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I don't think I could take this any further, or I feel disillusioned. What's another way to serve? And this has been the most intimate service, because you are the most visible, the most visible person in the community if you're a city councillor.
You are very visible, and I feel like you communicate. Because I'm still, even though I'm not in Orleans as much as I used to be, I still see you're very communicative. You're out there. People can see you. I think people get a sense that you really care about what you're doing, and you care about making an impact on the community. I think it shows. I ask just anecdotally, some, people that I know in the community, and that's the sort of message that I get. You got reelected by a landslide. Clearly, you're connecting with people. What is it you think that you're doing, maybe in addition to what I've shared, that is resonating with people? That's, people like you. People like the work that you're doing.
I think it's about meeting people where they are. A lot of traditional politicians will hold things like corn roasts and potlucks and whatever. I don't know the last time somebody with kids went to a pot roast or a corn roast or a potluck, right? It's not where you're creating opportunities for people to come to you. I believe in meeting people where they are. And largely that's been my approach when it comes to, my social media engagement. So I use Facebook a lot because traditionally people that are out there and care about the community and voting are of the age where they're probably on Facebook. So something 30 to well, now grandparents are on Facebook, you know what I mean? It's 30 and up, which is a blind spot for me a little bit. Youth engagement, which is something I try to work on the side as well, because I think that young people have really great ideas and innovative ideas too. But I think that sort of very honest and direct engagement on social media platforms that are productive, that allow for, longer than 240 characters. I believe in doing my job in full sentences, and not in these sort of chopped up, micro ideas. Sometimes I'm wrong, and that's okay. And that's why we have these discussions on social media or in public or via email or whatever. Sometimes I haven't always made the right decision or the best decision. And I think that the humility of admitting that and being yeah, I was wrong on this one. This is what I learned from it. I'll do better. That humility, that honesty, the fact that I am a dude from Orleans. That's what I am. People call me councillor, and I'm no, I'm just Matt. I'm a dude from Orleans. I'm here to serve you. I go through the same experiences that many people do. I've got young kids. I had young kids during the pandemic. I felt the same stresses as them. My wife and I both felt those stresses, very, very difficult. I have trouble getting my kids into city swimming lessons and skating lessons, just like everybody else. Those spots fill up in 4 minutes. I'm not jumping the queue. I'm in there with you. I drive on the same roads as people do every single day. And I think that, the lesson that I learned over my first 4 years is like, just speak the truth. Like, don't sound like a politician. If you don't like something or you feel a certain way about something, don't try and pad it. Don't try and, gussy it up. Just be honest with people and either they'll like you or they won't like you. And if they don't like you, they'll vote you out. And that's okay. Because I believe that people that, for the most part anyways, the people are always right. Like if I'm not the right guy anymore, then they'll find somebody else and that's fine. But the way to like go to sleep at night and put your head down and feel like, I did the right thing is to just be brutally honest, about everything. If you can't do something, tell people you can't do it. Do them the courtesy of telling them why you can't do it, why it can't be done. But just being, vulnerable, honest, and authentic, I think, are the most important things. People can smell fake from a mile away, and when I've tried to, especially in my first term, like, in the horse trading of politics, in order to, get something done for your community, sometimes you got to hold your nose on a vote, depending on who, what leadership you're dealing with or whatever. And to try and justify your vote on something that you don't yourself believe in, like, man, people can smell that a mile away. If you're being honest and you're being authentic and you're, even if somebody disagrees with you, they will respect the fact that you took the time to explain yourself, to be honest and to be authentic. I knocked on a door back in 2022 where somebody came to the door and said, like, I've disagreed with you on most things. But I know that you're really good for this community and I know that you work really hard. And, I got my road paved last year. We've been waiting on that for 35 years. The work that you do in the community, when somebody emails you, you or your team gets back to them as quickly as possible. For me, this is a job about service. And so that's what we've oriented our office towards. Some politicians are like very policy oriented. Let's have lots of motions at committee and let's have, let's do this sort of policy work. For me, it's about service. So like my entire office is oriented at Orleans, like 100% at Orleans. If somebody has a problem, we take that problem on and we do our best to fix it for them. And that's what it's got to be about.
The theme of this conversation has really been service. Your life has been about service to your community, your country. And that's quite rare. I think, I wonder if you could make a compelling argument or a compelling case to encourage more people to devote at least a piece of their life to service. Why is it important to you, Matt, to have a life of service, to give back to your community?
A lot of people I think that they ignore this because it's uncomfortable. I think a lot of people ignore things that are uncomfortable. But you're going to die and I'm going to die and we're all going to die. So, some people will take that information and be like, well, it's not even worth it. It's not even worth doing anything. Like, so why would I do anything for anybody else? But the fact of the matter is that, you're important and the community that you live in, is important. And the more people that do little things every single day to make the little space around them better, the better the world will be. And you leave a legacy behind through service to others, because you never know how much a kind word, a tree that you plant, a piece of garbage that you pick up, the very, very little things can have a massive impact on the world around you. And sure, like, it feels good to do things for yourself and to, and concentrate on your own well-being. You need to do that to a certain extent. But I feel like you multiply goodness and joy when you do something not for yourself, when you do something to leave a lasting impact. You never know. You never know how much of an impact you can have on someone just by saying something kind or doing something kind or volunteering, packing school lunches for kids whose parents are struggling, or, going down to Petrie Island on the weekend and cleaning up the Bill Holland Trail because some kids went down there and were silly and having a good time and not feeling very responsible and leaving stuff behind. The community is something far bigger than ourselves, and it's so important that we take care of it, that we take care of each other, and I promise you will feel really great joy and wonder and love if you just take the time to get to know the other people that live around you and do something that's going to have a lasting impact, no matter how big or how small it is. It feels great. Like, it feels really, really good to work on something that is bigger than yourself.
I like to close every conversation with this question, Matt. This podcast is all about growing up. Everyone has their own growing up story. Growing up means something different to everyone. What does growing up mean to you, Matt?
I think growing up to me means understanding the impact and taking responsibility for the impact that you have on others and the world around you, and taking on as much of that responsibility as you can. We talked about it in the beginning, so it's nice to come full circle. But for me, I mean, I was very hedonistic in my youth. Sure, I took on responsibility and did some jobs that required quite a bit of attention and responsibility when I was younger. But at the bottom of it, I was very much about having fun, having a good time, enjoying myself, going to see music, and just having a really good time, and perhaps not thinking about how that impacts the world around me. I think that growing up means, instead of it's looking up, it's looking beyond the horizon. Instead of what's tomorrow going to bring, it's thinking about 10 years from now, or 25 years from now, or even beyond your own lifetime. What are things going to look like as far and as deep into the future as you can? What is my daughter's life going to look like when she is my age? And then doing things now that have a massive that can have small things now that can have a massive impact on that in the future, like putting away, money for their school so that their life is not difficult and they're not in their 40s trying to pay off their university, for example. But I think that growing up is, basically looking from your navel to as far in the horizon as you can, and living your life thinking about what's happening over there.
Thank you for that, Matt. Well, this has been really a great conversation. I'm really grateful that you, and appreciative that you took the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me. I was so excited when we hopped on that I didn't thank you when we said hello. So I want to make sure that I'm really grateful that you took the time. Thank you.
Of course, it's been really great to reconnect with you and to chat with you. I think this is a really wonderful thing that you're doing, and being so vulnerable yourself too, and talking about your own struggles, your own mental health journey. That's very brave, and it's inspirational to others. People need to hear that they're not weird, that they're not alone in the fact that sometimes they feel really down about themselves, and sometimes they're too self-critical, and sometimes they have thoughts that maybe they wish they didn't have. We all have them. We are all self-doubting, and some days self-loathing. We all beat ourselves up. And I think that what you're doing and talking about that and exposing that is a really beautiful thing. So thank you for your service, Pat.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate you saying that. And I'm always looking for quality guests that could contribute to the conversation and to the community I'm trying to build. And I know you're all about community. So if there's anyone in the community of Orleans that you think would make a wonderful guest, I would love an introduction.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, sir. Nice talking to you.
Thanks, Pat. Nice chatting with you too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, buddy.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of After Peter Pan. If it resonated with you, I'd love if you could leave us a like, drop us a rating. It really helps to drive new audiences to the show. Thanks again, and until next time.